First of all, it's the Hazard Communication Standard. It's the Central Federal Register 1910-1200. And believe you me, there's 1,200 pages of the standard. I just want to show you briefly the standard. There's over 60 pages of the standard that OSHA and require us to adhere to. So it's not going to go in your training book. It's going to go in the main book over there, the master file, and you can look at it any time you want. And it's also on the network too. So we've got hard copies and it's electronic. But that is too huge for us to go over today. But our program follows that standard. Okay, so that's a good thing. I just want to make everybody aware that HAZCOM is the shortened name for the Hazard Communication Program. We call it HAZCOM. So when you hazard communication, you hear HAZCOM, it's nothing to do environmentally. It's HAZCOM as per the OSHA requirement. And HAZCOM is the #1 cited offense by OSHA every year without fail. Without fail in general industry. And the main reasons, and we'll go over this, we're going to do an exercise. Labeling is the worst one, but MSDS and training too. And it's not as though it's one of the, you say it's HAZCOM. There's a lot of hazards there, but physically people think it can't be that bad, but it doesn't have to be physical to HAMS. And we're going to go over that right now. It's not going to be right at you. So those are the kind of things. And I just want to give you an outline so that it'll flow a little bit easier as we get into the program. Okay, well, our program, what's going to go on, we're going to talk about is materials inventory, which we have in our Msds stations, which we'll go into right now. There's an inventory of all the materials that we have on site. And I believe we're up to 439. It will be 440 after today or tomorrow, because Dave just give me another one to look at. We just got a new material, and now we're doing this stuff. And material safety data sheets we'll go over in more detail. We're going to do an exercise where you actually have to read an MSDS together in groups, and we'll fill out a HMIS label. And hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for us. Labeling, training which we're going in, and the written program which we're going to be training too. Okay, all of you have seen these, I'm sure. You pretty much know we have 3 main MSDS stations. We have maintenance, shop, structural, and architectural. Each one of these, it has all of our MSDSs that are on for each material on site. It has information on how to read the different formats, and it has labels and booklets. Okay, and I think the 3 of them are pretty nice units. You also have individual books with specific MSDSs for materials in your areas, in the various departments. But these are the main areas where every material MSDS is located. There's also the safety office where it's located, and also it will eventually be electronic as well. But I have a hard copy of everything too. So that's where we can locate the MSDS. So we'll ask a question on this later. This one here is in the maintenance shop. That one there is a project that we're going to get into shortly. Chris will know this one inside out, so it shouldn't be too bad. So that's what we're going to try and cover. And this is a refresher for most of you. The other 2 groups had been through this before last year. And this is like a refresher. But we are going to do something a little bit different with the labeling side and try to address the main cause of what would be a regulatory issue. But the real reason why we want to address it is to make it safe for everybody that works here. So any questions before we get into the written program? Rich, on this one? All right, let's go. Okay, first of all, when we get into our HAZCOM program, the first couple of pages you're going to see a standard and a scope. And what the standard is really is to ensure that all chemicals produced or imported in the US are evaluated. So everybody that makes a material and either sells it to us or sends it to us, right, is going to have to evaluate it and let us know exactly what's in it, how to handle it, what protective equipment to wear, and a lot more things that we'll go over on the MSDS. It ensures that all the information we get in the hazards are communicated to employers and to us. And then it makes sure that we have a written communication program that includes labeling, MSDSs, and training. The very things that OSHA cite us on all the time. So that's briefly the purpose of the standard, but the scope requires chemical importers and manufacturers to assess the health hazards of these chemicals. Years ago, anything could come into this country, or anything could be made in this country actually, and there was no real onus on the manufacturer to tell you or divulge everything about it. And there's some instances now where it's still a struggle, you know, with proprietary and trade secrets, where it's not that easy to get that information. And we have one or two of those here actually, but small items. It also requires that we have we communicate these hazards to employers and label the containers. Every container that comes into the plant, say this is a 5-gallon, 55-gallon, a plastic bag even, has to be labeled. We have to know what it is, and it has to have an MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet, to accompany this. Okay, now I know you know what the sheets are and that, but, and then also we're going to go into later, if we pour anything or we use anything from the large container into the small container, that has to have a label also. And that's one of the biggest citations, is this could be labeled. We pour it, we take it somewhere, we start using it, and we don't know what's in here. It has to be labeled. So that's something we'll do an exercise on. We'll get that. So, and then the biggest thing of all, Smith-Midland, with this scope, we are required to communicate all this information to you. It's called your right to know. You have the right to know every single aspect of any material that we're using on the premises. And there's a lot of sections on the MSDSs which will go on there, but you have the right to know about everything. I'll give you a quick example. I've been here a few weeks, and Easy Set were coming in, and we were going around the outside of the yard, and we came across a big 55-gallon drum. It was blue, plastic, no label. Didn't know what it was. Now, in instances in other factories, some people would actually take the top off, smell it. Whew, that's a no-no. Some other people might even put their fingers in and taste. I mean, I kid you not. That's something we never do. We have to be able to identify where we bought it, we have to trace it back, and that's why it's important with our system that we'll install a standard that when we buy anything, when we purchase something, we will require not just the MSDS, but we want a conspicuous label on there. We can't have, some people put a label that size on them with a 55-gallon drum. Now that's giving something away right there, I feel, but we want something conspicuous that we can all read, and this is the system that we're using right now, okay? So that's what we want. So do not, under any circumstances, if you don't know what it is, don't use it, okay? Let's go to your supervisor, let's collaborate and find out about, you know, identifying the product. Okay, so that's the scope as well. Now I just want to go over what we're going to do. We're going to train in English and Spanish 2, the written program that we've had. And we've had this for several years. We've gone over the purpose, the scope, hazard determination. Okay, the way that Smith-Midland determines a hazard is by the MSDS. Okay. So what we use the manufacturer safety data sheet to determine the hazards that we have on site. It's usually used by engineering, maintenance, technical. If we're going to use a product, they usually look at the MSDS to determine, you know, how it's going to affect and how it's going to work, not just from a practical standpoint of production, but how it's going to affect us all here. And that's why there's so much information on it. Material safety data sheets will give us all the information on the material, what's in there, whether the flammability, we're going to look at these, I mentioned on these earlier, health hazards, flammability, reactivity, and personal protective equipment that we have to wear. And this is the system that we use, which we'll go over. Chemical inventory 3.0, if you look down the bottom of that first page. On every MSDS station that I showed you earlier, we have in book number 1 an inventory of every single material that we have on site. And that's required in the standard by OSHA, the 1200 standard. The labeling program, the 4.0, as you can see, is the largest section on there. And it's the largest section for a reason, because I think not only is it the most cited, but it's where the most errors can occur. So there's three, we said 2, but there's 3 systems now that we actually used to identify and label our containers. At Smith-Midland, we're going to be using what they call the HMIS system, Hazardous Material Identification System. And like we said, it will determine health hazard, flammability, what they call instability. It's called some reactivity as well on some lines. And there'll be a section on the new labels for PPE as well. And we'll be doing, like I said, a quick exercise on that later. Any questions?
What do you guys use when you make something? How do you label it?
Well, that's something I'm glad you brought up now. We may as well. Unless it's a manufacturer, if you're mixing something, there has to be a standard format. You know, and you're dead right, because I'll give an example. Only one time have I ever had to speak to a physician on the phone about what happened at a facility. A guy who was using a spray very similar to cast off that we're going to be discussing, he added another chemical to it. He added a solvent to it. So it's an oil base. He adds a solvent because he thought it would degrease better. And he hits a warm platen, and it fumes up, and he passes out. The reason he passes out. Wouldn't normally need respiratory protection. Out he goes. He's on the floor. There's panic, everybody. So when we get there, nobody got the MSDS, right? And even if they had the MSDS, right, they all thought that he had it, what was just labeled up for, which was the release agent. But he had mixed two things together. And that created such a problem for us and the physician too. Because luckily he came around pretty quickly and explained he put something else in there. So we got to find two MSDSs. We had a system similar to what I showed you, but the guy who was finding it, the supervisor, panicked. And the way we look at that, the way we look at these now is, if you look at the cast off is the name of the product, okay? So we always, and that's the way we label everything, identify, we look up C for cast off alphabetically. What the guy done, he looked at the manufacturer. And he looks up, say, Unitex, and he finds 10 products with Unitex and panics, and so it took 20 minutes to find out what the guy had used. But the sad part is, it wasn't approved that he'd done this off his own back. If you're going to mix something, it has to be approved. If we have a standard, it has to be written, and we can't mix, unless it's a 2-pad epoxy or 3-pad. That's
around here, most times they just mix epoxy.
Right. That's okay, because that's normal, and you get a set of instructions for that, of what to do. But do not mix anything else up if it's not known at all, because that was pretty nasty that it happened. But a great point, Rich. Good point indeed. Anything else? Do we mix anything up in the office? Right. Yeah, okay. Right, okay, well, we'll go over that in a second. So that's another good point too, Ron. It's a great point. Okay, but the label side of it is fairly self-explanatory. But the fact is, even though it's self-explanatory, on site, Chris, I went around last night, took some photographs, and we don't label everything that we show. And so that's something that I challenge everybody today when we leave here, is find any item that isn't labeled. Let's get with the supervisors, get the right labeling, go to the MSDS, and let's get everything labeled up. And it's for our safety. It really is. And also from a regulatory standpoint, it would help too. We had an inspection. But the label side, label in the workplace, also utilities have to be labeled too. And some of the utilities aren't labeled here, which is good.